And we are live and ready to roll. So good morning, everybody. It's, what is it, Thursday morning, I guess, the 18th. And this is the Senate Agricultural Committee. And we're going to be hearing from Representative John Bartholomew in regards to H 421. It's the Animal Cruelty Investigation Response and Training bill that we got over from the House. Well, we talked with the House members yesterday, and they reported on it and thought we would hear from John this morning. So I think you know everybody on the committee, John. Welcome to the Senate, and if you would like to give us your thoughts and ideas in regards to H 421, we'd be glad to hear from you.
Well, it's a pleasure to be back in the Senate. This Senate room is a lot bigger than the one I'm used to, so it's nice.
Yeah, you got a pretty nice chair there too.
Yes, this is a better chair than you would normally give me when I would come to your room. Yeah.
Well, beats the heck out of that little stool we used to make you sit on.
Yeah, I usually would end up in the file cabinet. And I'm not sure what you already have been told about this bill or what you would like to hear from me. I would point out, of course, that this has been a pretty high priority in the reports coming from the Animal Cruelty Investigation Advisory Board. And if you recall, that was actually a board that was originally suggested by the Senate. And they have provided us with reports and recommendations, and their concern for a number of years, and as well as discussions when I was on House Agriculture and Forestry, was who is actually authorized to go and initiate an investigation when there's an allegation of animal cruelty. And our statutes have been not very clear, and that's basically what this bill is trying to do. And I think that really the statement of purpose clearly describes what the bill is doing. You've probably read it, but It proposes to amend the list of individuals authorized to investigate cases of animal cruelty, require humane officers to receive trainings approved by the Animal Cruelty Investigation Advisory Board, require the board to maintain an index of humane officers who've had the training, and allows the board to create a refresher course if they see fit in the future for these investigators. That's basically what this does. And I guess a couple of important points that may or may not have already been made about this is when you look at how the definition is changed. I'm on page 2 of the bill where it says any enforcement officer is defined 23 VSA section 411A. That's basically a definition of a law enforcement officer that's already in statute. And I would point out here that keep in mind that just because you are on that list does not mean that you would ever be expected to or required to conduct an animal cruelty investigation. It's just a convenient definition for what constitutes a law enforcement officer. And one example I could use there is, I believe if you check that chapter, the Capitol Police would be on that list. Now, they could conceivably be engaged in an animal cruelty investigation, but probably never would, just as an example. Another point I would make that I think is important is if you look at the people who could be humane officers, it talks about a designated employee of a humane society, meaning an employee, not just someone who has some casual association, and an animal control officer appointed by the legislative body of the municipality. Those are people that could be included, but one conspicuous absence there would be veterinarians. And you could reasonably say, well, why wouldn't a veterinarian be able to do this? And I think the answer is, well, number one, veterinarians probably aren't interested in doing that. And they may or may not have the training to actually conduct an investigation. They may not understand the law enforcement piece of it, but there's nothing in this bill that precludes a law enforcement officer who's being called into a case from bringing in whoever they want to assist them in evaluating the situation, collecting evidence, providing advice. So that is where a veterinary professional would come into play if needed to help a humane officer to conduct the investigation. I think there was also something added by House Agriculture in terms of the animal control officer, and there's words that they added there, who's authorized by the legislative body to perform the duties and function of a humane officer. And I believe it was Vermont League of Cities and Towns asked that to be added, so that just because you are an animal control officer, the town wants to know what you're up to. And so you can't just on your own say, I'm going to go off, get this training and be an animal, a humane officer. You have to have authority of your town as well as being the animal control officer for your town. So those, I don't know if those points were made before. Linda tells me I don't need to go through the bill, and you've already heard from, I believe, the presenter of the bill.
Yeah.
So I don't know if there's anything else you'd like me to add. I
Well,
support the bill. I think that you'll hear from the board and they will support the bill.
yeah. Well, over the years, you've given us a lot of good professional input on bills from the years you spent on the Ag Committee, and we remember that you'd been kind of pushing this idea for a while, and that's why we wanted to get you in and get your take on it, John. It sounds like everybody seems to be in agreement with what the House finished up with, and we've got to sell it to our colleagues in the Senate, but it sounds like most everybody is on the same page. So there really isn't any pushback from anybody. Sounds like most everybody's in agreement with it. So Chris got a question for you.
Well, and maybe
Brian.
I guess I missed it. John, you're not on House Ag anymore?
No, I'm feeling a little bit like I've lost my identity after being there for so long, but I'm actually was assigned to transportation this time around.
Oh, that's right. I have heard that. Okay. Well, we'll just take your more general expertise then. There's been also some discussion, and maybe it's not fair to ask if you haven't been part of it, but around the shelter bill that you were part of last year. And the basic idea is that we inadvertently made it tough for grazers, people who are grazing their animals. Do you have any, or maybe Mr. Chair, is that coming somewhere else, or was that ever discussed as adding to this? Do we have a sense of either of those?
Well, I don't know. It was sort of talked about putting that in the miscellaneous bill, so I don't know if it's buried in there, and we didn't hear much about it yesterday. But it might be buried in that 420 bill that came over. But I would expect that we will, when we deal with 420, if it isn't there, we'll, put it in there and get it done. Well, it's all we gotta do is clarify some language, I believe, in regards to animals that are out grazing.
I'm not exactly
I-
sure what the House is doing with it, but my understanding is that there's a minor tweak that's being proposed. I would point out that I was shared on a message from Barry Laundere. I don't know if you remember him. He used to be the Vermont spokesman for the Humane Society of the United States. He's no longer in that role, but he's still associated with the organization. And the message he sent was dazzlingly comprehensive in his arguments about why this wasn't a problem and how these issues are that it just isn't presenting the problem that they expected. So I would encourage you to reach out to him to comment on this. Like I said, his review of the law and his position on this was extremely comprehensive and thorough.
Well, we'll certainly, Linda will have his name and we'll certainly get hold of him, when we work on that. Any other, Brian, you had a question, I think.
I did, Bobby, and I can wait until we actually go over the bill if you like, but I'm looking on page 2, John, of the bill, line 7. It says a designated Humane Society employee. So I can see a question coming up that might say, okay, does that mean the lady that sits at the desk and is an intake person, or who designates that person?
Well, my presumption is that it would be designated by the organization.
Okay.
That they've identified this person as someone who they are willing to, because they're going to have to send them to training. But then the key point is that there's a real association and you're an actual employee of an organization that's recognized by the state, registered with the Secretary of State as a bona fide animal humane society.
That sounds like a good
That's
answer.
my reading of it.
Yeah. All right. Thank you.
If there are no other comments or questions for John, thanks a lot, John, for your time. Appreciate your thoughts and ideas on that, and your time this morning for being with us. And we'll move on.
Okay,
So,
it's always a pleasure. Thank you.
Well, it hasn't always been, but today went pretty good. We had the new guy in from Danville yesterday reporting, and Henry Pearl, and he wondered if we were going to initiate him or not, and we were good to him. So anyways, thanks, John, and we'll be in touch.
Okay, thank you.
So committee, I think Jim's on the line with us, and I don't know, do we have, I wonder if Linda has that language, or you could pull it up on the screen for the members to see that new language, Jim, that the agency.
Sure, I have it right. Yep, I have it ready to go.
Oh, good. You're a good man, Jim.
Here we go.
And thanks for jumping on with us so quickly.
Yeah.
Oh, no problem. No problem. Okay, so for the record, Jim Demery, Let's Console. This is the Senate Appropriations hasn't seen this yet. Actually, we haven't walked through this. This is a recommendation from Senate Education, which passed the bill out without changes, but recommended that appropriations make these changes because they're more about money. than anything else. So, should I just take you through the changes? Is that what you want?
Yeah, that's what I'd like, and what we're thinking is that we would kind of go through those with you, Jim, and if we can agree, you're going to go through those changes, I believe this afternoon with Brian and the Education Committee, and what we talked about is possibly doing a joint amendment on the Senate floor from both Education and us on these particular changes. And if we get that far with the bill, we would do a joint amendment to the bill on the Senate floor. So I think Brian, if he hasn't already contacted you, will be contacting you and asking you to run through those amendments with the Ed Committee.
Okay. Yep.
But I want to just jump in and make sure that we're talking about the same thing, because Campion has sent us two potential amendments. One is about money that shifts it to out of the ed fund and has a one-time appropriation and stuff like that. And the other is more technical in nature that comes from AOE directly. That's the one we're hoping to look at today.
They're both in
Yeah,
here.
it starts in section 4, Jim, I believe.
Yeah. So section 4, I believe that's the federal form.
Yeah.
And that has been amended to reflect AOE comments. So that's here as well as the changes to the funding.
Yeah, the budget part, I don't think we agree with it all, and I don't believe we do. But it'll be easier getting rid of that part. This part here, starting with section 4, is the one that I'd like to be able to spend a little time on with you this morning to explain those.
Okay. So let's go there. Go there. Okay. So we're in the part. It's section 3 actually, and of this draft, and it is the part that deals with the secretaries defining what is necessary to be collected for various federal benefits, given the fact that the forms won't be coming in for food programs because they're moving to universal. So the only change here really is, so when we're talking on line 20 here, Secretary shall define student poverty for purposes of, we had before determining qualification for federal funds by school districts, and they've broadened that out to say qualification for federal funds by LEAs, which are supervisory unions, school districts, and schools. So that's basically the theme to this amendment, is to include a broader scope in terms of what these definitions and forms are used for.
And Jim, is that, we've talked about this before, that you can, I don't want to say play games, but you can deal with this system differently if you are determining the boundaries at different spots. Does this give them the flexibility to do that?
So I'm not sure what that means, actually. I'm not sure.
So here in Burlington, some of our schools have universal meals, but the district itself doesn't. In other places, there's been discussions of, it's all about hitting these federal averages. So if you, in some places, lump more schools together, you could get the whole district in. In some places, you have to just do it by school. And I think that's an important feature that we want to make sure not precluding, in fact, if anything, encouraging. So that's what I mean. And it
Yeah.
sounds like this gives them flexibility, but I don't know.
It sounds to me that that is true. It gives them more flexibility because it's giving them broader scope to define these for a broader group of entities. But I would defer, I think, on that question to AOE.
Thank you.
So that's it for section 3.
No,
Jim?
no, that this appears a number of times here. So just to say, they're using this language in numerous places here. I'll come back to B and C, but you'll see it here in 2 and 3 and B. So basically, all the data collection and requirements to collect is on not just school districts, but schools and SUs as well. The other change they made in B and C, again, we're up here where the secretary is doing the various things. One is defining student poverty. Here is determining student eligibility for various educational programs and benefits where economic need is a consideration. And C is collecting and reporting disaggregated and student level performance data as required. So those are the changes to this section.
So are you guys okay with that particular change?
I guess, although I still don't know exactly what it means.
Do you want to run through that? See, the bill that I have before here that you sent out on the 16th at 1 o'clock, those changes were already in there. So some of them changes were made on Tuesday. Is that right, Jim?
Oh boy, I have to say, sir, I've been working on so many different bills and amendments, I can't recall the timing.
My sense of it is that different entities were requesting options, and Senate Ed said, we'll put them all in a bill. And so what you and I saw this morning, Mr. Chair, was just specifically the AOE section that Senator Campion said was technical, but this is looping in some of what the school the essays asked for and all that. So it's probably hard to delineate.
Yeah, see, if you go back through what the Ed Committee did on Tuesday or Wednesday, like these changes that Jim just talked about were already in that particular bill. So why don't we move on then, Jim?
Okay, so the other changes are on funding. Do you want to see those?
I don't think so. We want to go to that. I think we want to go to that section 4. Is it?
That's right here. Section 4. So we had to renumber this because we took out a section because it was the exemption from the excess speed penalty.
Yeah.
That was removed under this version because school budgets wouldn't be paying for these universal meals. So therefore they wouldn't have to have an exclusion from excess spending. So it got renumbered, but this section 3 is the old section 4 that you are referring to.
See, on what we got from the agency is school districts, and individual schools, students' eligibility for various for various educational programs and benefits where economic need is a consideration. Need is, yeah, a consideration. And then 2, see 2, collection by local school education agency, school districts and.
Yeah.
Yeah,
Jim, maybe it'd be easier. The email I sent you asking if you could come this morning has in that thread has the language that the chair's referencing.
Okay. Let me find that again.
Some of that is here, but it's not as.
yeah, it's not
So
very,
we're trying to figure out what we're really talking about.
Bobby, could I also ask, what does student level performance data mean? Are those like grades?
that's number C, Brian,
Yes.
or letter C.
Yeah.
Yeah, so this language here that Sarah Pearson sent over with the AOEs is the same language as you're seeing here, but I put it into more our format.
Yeah, but some words are missing and all that, and aren't there, Jim?
What's missing?
Well, Brian just asked a question about C, letter C.
See. Yeah.
In the material that you have on the other screen that AOE sent over, doesn't, you've got a C showing on our screen, and
Yep.
but we don't have a C on this paper that Brian sent us this morning.
Right, but the words are the same. And for collecting and reporting disaggregated and student level performance data as required that was the language from the AOE. That's the same language as here. I just put it into our format by doing a list form. So you have A, B, and C. So it's easier to read.
So C is, Brian Collmore just asked a question. You want to ask that question again, Brian?
Sure, Bobby. I understand what disaggregated means. I don't understand exactly what student level performance data means. Does that mean like school marks, they're getting A's and B's, or does it mean something totally different? I don't know what that means.
Well, it's not defined and was defined by AOE. So they're the best person to answer that question. I read it to be student level performance usually means, I think, grade level performance.
Right. Okay. Why? I'm trying to understand why that would have anything to do with feeding students. In other words, only students that are getting good grades. I'm really not understanding this.
And
Well, I can't give that testimony because I'm not behind this language. I think you have to hear from AOE on that.
Okay.
well, and we can ask Brian about that particular language
okay.
as well.
Yep.
You want to be sure and mark that, Brian?
I will.
Yeah. Okay, Jim?
So we've been through this language. Aside from this language, the other changes are all to the funding.
That in that language is language that came from AOE as well, I believe, right?
No, I'm not sure what their position on that is. That language came from the Vermont Superintendents Association, I believe, working in conjunction with other advocates. like maybe the Vermont School Boards Associations, the V's, if you will. I believe it definitely came directly from the Superintendent's Association, and I believe working with others. And their
Yeah.
testimony was basically, if you put this in school budgets, then every school district, which are like 116 or so in the state, would have to pass budgets with this amount in there to cover universal school meals. And what happens when they don't pass budgets, and therefore they have to reduce their budgets, but this is an unfunded state mandate, so they can't not fund this. They would have to cut other programs or staff in order to make room in their budgets for this. And that was the kind of tenor of the testimony that they heard from the Vermont Superintendents Association.
Jim, was there any recognition from those testifying that this isn't a mandate, starting in September, that this is that there's contemplated here a phase in? In fact, there is anticipated a phase in?
I don't recall if that came up.
Pretty salient fact, I would argue.
Yeah. So, Chris, did you have any other questions on Brian's language?
No, I mean, this look, if we can give AOE some technical changes here that makes this more doable, I'm all for that. I don't pretend to really understand what they're getting here. But it doesn't, doesn't scream out at me. But so no, I'm good at this point, but I'm not quite sure how we go forward from here.
Right, and I guess Rosie's the one that sent this over, along with Ted Fisher that we heard from last week or the week before. But if it would seem like if Rosie feels like this is positive changes that would make it easier for her and the agency to administer the program, seems like, it would make sense to do it. So I don't know if any of you have opinions in regards to, just general opinions in regards to those changes or not.
I don't really have an opinion yet. I just have those questions. And I don't know where we're going here. Both us and Ed has already voted the bill out. Has it gone to appropriations yet or not?
It's down there now, Brian. And
Okay.
We're supposed to take it up this afternoon at maybe 3:00 or something like that.
Okay.
I think Jim's scheduled to come in this afternoon. I think it's around 3 without looking it up. Do you have that on your schedule, Jim?
I've got Senate appropriations looking at this at 240 to 340.
Okay, 240.
Yep.
And so I would hope that either Chris or Brian that you would be able to come over there sometime during that. But these amendments that we are just talking about, they're going to show up in that bill that we already have in appropriations. And what we talked about, Brian and I and Chris earlier this morning, was that
Champion.
Brian Campion, was that if we looked at these this morning and his committee would look at these changes that Rosie proposed this afternoon, that that we would do a joint, floor amendment to make those changes, on the floor when the bill gets there, if we get it out of appropriations. As far as that money goes, as far as moving that to the general fund, that's not in the bill, but we certainly aren't going to recommend or suggest that we do that, we're going to stick with what we talked about as incorporating this into the overall system within a 5-year period of time. And we would need to have general fund, not general fund. We would need about $5.5 million to incorporate that over each year for the next 5 years. And Chris and I were talking earlier about maybe setting up some kind of a matching, use some federal money to match local money. So even hit school districts for the 1/5 of the 25 million that it would cost overall, that it would ease them into it over a period of time. So that's where we are. I don't know if you guys have got some comments in regards to either issue at this time or not. No. Got to have some thinking time. Jim?
Just to mention, if you're thinking about using federal funds in a matching program or otherwise, I know Steve Klein, JFO, we've talked a lot about use of ESSER 1, ESSER 2, and ESSER 3 funds. So they're tracking those buckets and how they're being used. So you might want to have a word with JFO and just see what's available.
I know they've got one heck of a lot of money in the those ESSER funds, is it, or
It's ESSER, ESSER funds, and there's 3 buckets: ESSER 1, ESSER 2, and ESSER 3.
Yeah, they haven't even spent all of one yet. I mean, it's millions and millions and millions. I've got those numbers here. Do you have the numbers, Jim?
I don't know. JFO is keeping track, and it changes. It's changing day by day as they start to use funds.
Yeah, the last deal is like 200 and some million.
But the ESSER funds, 90% have to go directly to school districts. The 10% is reserved to the secretary, and the 10% reserve was being used for these funding projects. So it's not as big of a number as you mentioned. I think ESSER 3 is more like 26 million available for use, for example.
At state level, right?
To be appropriated by the state for various uses. You can't restrict the 90% of the funds coming in, but you can restrict the 10%. And that's what we're talking about here.
Well, the 90%, have you got that number?
I don't know how those numbers, it's really JFO that's got those numbers.
But 10% is that number you just gave us, I believe, right?
Yeah, so 10%, yeah. So actually you can do the math, right? But about 26 million is the 10% of ESSER 3.
So that leaves 260 million going to the districts. And according to what we heard, it's pretty loose. They can use that money for a lot of different things. There's not that many strings hooked to it. So there isn't any reason why we should have to give them more money to start this little feeding program. And that's 3. Number 2 is how much, Jim? The 10%.
The 10%, I believe, again, is about 26 million.
For is it 2?
That's a 3.
No, but what about 2?
I don't know about 2 and 1. I'm not sure what's left.
Well, 1, they haven't spent all of 1 yet, and then we're going to start on 2.
The person who's got all of that information is Brianna in JFO.
Yeah. But anyways, so have we got any other questions in regards to this language that Brian presented and Jim has just gone over with us from committee members?
No, my question is for you, Mr. Chair. Do you want me to reach out to Rosie and see if I can get a plain English explanation here? Or?
Well, somebody's got to, because Brian needs an answer to his question of why that's in there and what does that mean. And if she has other comments that she would or you would like to ask her or she'd like to give you, then we can relay that to Brian and Anthony and Corey.
Okay, I'll try to figure that out. Maybe I can even talk to her, and if you see me jump off, that'll be why.
Yeah, and so I get anything else for Jim from you folks? If not, thanks a lot, Jim, for coming on board as quick as you did without a lot of notice. We appreciate it.
No problem.
Yeah, and have a good day.
Okay, you too.
So you're gonna try to catch up with Rosie, Chris, and get that kind of squared away. And we've got VTC coming in at 10, but maybe Linda caught up with Chris Gray or somebody. Did you get hold of anybody to come in a little bit early, Linda?
Yes, he did come in and I told him you weren't done yet, so I can email him and see if he can come now.
Is there anyone else that has come in?
No.
No. So this next issue, well, we talked about it a little bit yesterday, dealing with the VTC farm in Norwich, Vermont. And yesterday with our joint meetings, there was a couple of people that brought that up with when we had our joint meeting yesterday with the House. So we've got, I think you got new agendas this morning from Linda. So is that we've got Pat Moulton coming from VTC, and she can tell us and explain to us what their thinking is down there. And then Chris Gray he's the guy that rents the farm at the present time. And then Omer, is that Triaman? He's from the foundation, and so we'll see what their deal, they own the land that's around the farm, as far as I know and understood. So I think our question is the farm gonna stay farming? What's gonna happen to the guy that's there and the farmers that's there? Did he have an option, or could he have bought that place? Because I see where it was appraised somewhere for 1.1 million for what VTC has there. And so anyways, we've got some questions. We certainly, I would think, would want to keep that farm farming, and if at all possible, and see, what they have in mind to move forward with. So if any of you want to grab a coffee or anything, we'd take 5 minutes and do
Sure.
that. And maybe if Linda hears back from Chris, we'll start as soon as, if he comes in time so we can get going, Linda, before Pat's time. Otherwise, we'll wait for Pat. And good morning. It's good to see you folks. This is the Senate Ag Committee, and we're having a conversation with the folks from Norwich and VTC in regards to the dairy, VTC's dairy farm there in Norwich. And I think we'll start with the committee introducing themselves so everybody can get a feel of who's here. I'm Bobby Starr, and I chair the committee and I'm from Essex and Orleans County.
Good morning. I'm Chris Pearson, Senator from Chittenden County.
Good morning. I'm Anthony Polina from Washington County.
Brian Collmore from Rutland County.
And Senator Parent, he'll be with us shortly. He's from Franklin County. So welcome, everyone. And when you start, you can introduce yourselves and where you're from and who you represent. But I know we're going to start with the president of VTC, Pat Moulton. And welcome, Pat. And we kind of wanted to hear what you folks had in mind with the VTC building and farm operation that you have in Norwich. I know I went down to the groundbreaking quite a few years ago, the ribbon cutting, and quite an impressive place to visit. So with that, Pat, we'll turn it over to you, and you can give us an update in regards to what's happening there.
Okay, and this can be a somewhat long story, so I'll try to keep it short and try to focus really on what you're hoping to have as an outcome, which what I'm hearing you say, Senator, is kind of what's up now? Kind of give us the update of, since you were there for the ribbon cutting. Is that an accurate way to frame this?
Yes, because we all, sort of had high hopes and great ideas about that operation, and know that the people in Norwich certainly enjoy having that farm there, and so we were kind of curious what was happening to it, and felt that the best place to go is to you to try to get some answers.
Yep. Well, sure. So for the benefit of the committee, This was a property we were gifted back in 2014, I think. This was a project that was born before I came to Vermont Tech. My predecessor, Dan Smith, was key, and a gentleman who was here at the time, Chris Dutton, were key in setting this up. But the Sieglers had gifted the entire property, which was well over 300 acres, to us. We formed a partnership with Upper Valley Land Trust, and Jeannie McIntyre can explain that in more detail, where they were taking ownership of the surrounding land, the 350 plus or 330 plus, I'm not going to get it right, Jeannie, acres. And they paid us for that. And in exchange for that income, we retrofitted an area on the farm to be a dairy processing creamery. We had received grant funds to help us outfit the creamery. Also, as part of the gift was the farm, the barns, the farmhouse, a mobile home lot, and a neighboring house next door that was a residential house. We converted that residential house into dorm space, if you will, for our students. And we built the creamery. And the plan was that we would have a private sector dairy creamery operator operating on the farm and teaching our students. And that is Chris Gray and Norwich Farm Creameries. We also had a private sector farmer with cows on the farm. We actually had one initially, didn't last long, didn't work well. We had a second one who was there, oh God, I think maybe a little over a year. The timing is I didn't have a chance to look that up. And the plan was that they were private sector farms. Our students would be engaging. They'd be learning value-added dairy processing from Chris. They'd be learning agricultural practices from the farmer on the property. We had one semester that we had 6 students in residence, and in the house we built into a res hall, basically. They were learning from Chris. They were learning from a gentleman we had on the farm at that time, Josh Swift. And I will say that to a student, they were not happy with the experience. For one, we were late getting the dairy processing up and running from an inspection process that Chris probably knows better than I do. So the students didn't get as much intense time in the dairy. They were not happy being that far from campus. These were second year dairy farm students, and they felt that they knew more than the farmer in residence that they were teaching from. We had issues, for example, with students who were not getting the adequate experience, say, in artificial insemination, because the private sector farm was buying the semen. It's his semen. He wants to know when you're going to be inseminated, it's going to work. So he was having the best students doing the insemination, and those who needed the practice weren't getting that. There were other aspects of the operations. We ended up refunding some money. Chris's wife, actually, Laura Brown, served as our residential director there and was doing grocery shopping, et cetera, for the students, which worked out well, but they were feeling they paid too much in their board part of the arrangement. And so we ended up refunding them money. And I had 3 students come to speak to me, were quite impassioned, of the 6 we had, saying this just isn't working. We also, the farmer on the residence was losing a lot of money. There were conflicts between he and the dairy processor and the type and quality of milk. In the end, he was losing a lot of money. Long story there, I won't go into. He left, and we actually assisted him to kind of get on his feet, if you will, after he left as a young farmer, and that left Chris there with no milk supply. Chris started bringing in his milk. He can speak to that in greater depth than I can. We helped initially subsidize his milk deliveries. But we also were pretty clear that the plan to try to make this our dairy farm operation was not going to work. Many reasons, not the least of which is that farm is not ideally set up for milking. As I've come to learn, it was built to raise prize Holsteins by Mr. Siegler. It was a tie stall barn, is a tie stall barn for that purpose. There is no grazing land. The land has not been managed for nutrient management and grazing and forage or for planting and growing hay, etc. So feed has to come in from outside, manure has to go out. And that's not, as you can relate, Senator Starr, and I'm sure Senator Parent can relate. That's not the way you typically do dairy farming. Also, the layout of the barn made it a little more difficult for cleaning, et cetera, et cetera. We felt we would be better to keep our agricultural operations based here in Randolph. So we've stopped educating. An agreement we had with Upper Valley Land Trust that was put together at the time. They were partnering with us on the acquisition of the land and our building of the dairy facility, gave them an option to buy at such time as we cease our educational opportunities. So they, in fact, exercised their option. Making another long story very short, that didn't work. Upper Valley Land Trust filed a lawsuit in court. We have subsequently settled that lawsuit. There is no pending litigation, and I'm not at liberty to discuss the details of that settlement. It is protected as agreed by the attorneys. There is a public records request pending for that lawsuit that Jeannie can speak to better, but we are unable to provide those details. So, but we are clear we want to sell the property. We are divesting of many properties that are no longer core to the mission of Vermont Tech. And I don't need to tell all of you senators about, especially you, Senator Starr, on the Appropriations Committee, about the financial challenges this Vermont State Colleges is facing right now. And part of our transformation project is to rid ourselves of less than core properties. So Norwich Farm, which we're not using, we have, I should say, we've honored our 5-year lease with Mr. Gray and Norwich Farm Creamery. We have enabled them to remain on the property. Their lease expires at the end of June. We have provided notification well in advance that we're not exercising the 2 options for him to extend the lease and that it is our interest to sell. We currently have the farm on the market and a realtor listed. We have what we call the greenhouse next door. It's colored green. It's not a greenhouse. We have listed that as well. We have an offer on the greenhouse. We've had several people looking at the farm. Thus far, no one has provided us an offer. And we are seeking to sell that along with, we have four properties here in Randolph we're marketing. One is actively listed with a realtor. We have an offer and a purchase and sales agreement on that one, I'm pleased to say. And the effort here is to divest of that which costs us money. We spend about $70,000 a year in operating expenses maintaining that farm. With no educational value, no students on the farm, no opportunity there. And it's frankly become in that situation where the students here are subsidizing that operation. We cannot afford to continue to do that. We need to try to realize the revenue from the sale of our assets to pump back into the educational experience, scholarship, you name it, that we need to do here at Vermont Tech. So we have listed the properties for fair market value, and that's our intent, to sell it at fair market value. We did have one offer on the farm from the Norwich Farms Foundation, which we rejected as being too far below fair market value. So that's kind of the short of a very long story.
Yeah, well, thank you, Pat. I'm wondering, how many acres remain with the farm and the 1 or 2 houses? There's the dorm house and the farmhouse. Is that what I understand?
Yeah, the dorm house is on approximately 2 acres. The farm is 6.23 acres. It contains a 2,800 square foot residence, a 920 square foot mobile home, several barns, not the least of which is the 8,600 square foot tie stall barn, several outbuildings, and the creamery operation that Norwich Farms Creamery operates from, which is attached. Well, it's a separate facility, but it's all connected with the farm or with the barn. So it's the balance of the land beyond the 6.23 is owned by Upper Valley Land Trust, and the greenhouse and the 2 acres are separate from that parcel, the 6.23 acres.
Yeah, and in your advertisement to sell, is there anything in that sales agreement that I don't know if you put one together because you haven't sold anything yet, but will there be anything in that sales agreement that would keep that farm in some type of an agricultural operation?
No, we don't have that as a restriction for purchase. It's not a restriction that the donor provided. There's no deed restriction. It remain in agriculture. There's no gift restriction. It remains in agriculture. And in fact, the Sieglers who still live in Norwich in a recent article indicated they really don't want to get involved in this discussion. I will note that the zoning regulations in Norwich do provide for agricultural use, and housing is a conditional use and it has to be tied to a planned unit development. So there are some fairly significant hoops to jump through if you're going to do something other than agriculture on that property. But it is not, that is not a deed restriction we intend to pass along, as it's not one we currently are operating under.
But
And I should say there's no cows on the farm now, and there haven't been cows in 3-ish years when Mr. Swift left the operation. So the only animals on the farm might be animals that Mr. Gray is keeping for his own personal use, but there's no commercial dairy or commercial farming operation happening there, and have not been for several years.
And if you have 6.23 acres that go with the farm, that doesn't count the 2 acres that go with some house.
Correct, correct.
So,
That's
so if you've got 6.2 acres that go with the buildings, there can't be a whole lot of land left that could be utilized anyhow.
That's very correct. Yep, that is true. I did send to Linda, and I took off the Vermont Atlas this morning, a photo, an aerial satellite photo, if you'd like to take a look at that. If Linda has it, I don't know if I asked for screen sharing. I don't see that I have it yet, but I'm happy to share that, or Linda can share that with you. It contains the farm parcel. You'll see a relatively amateurishly drawn line because this was taken before the house parcel was a separate parcel. So, but I can show that if you'd like. So, I am co-host now. Okay, I see it. There it is. So, okay, let's see. Can you see that?
Yep.
Okay, so this shows you, this is the parcel in question here. I will say this is the mobile home that is part of the property. I'm not sure. And this is the farmhouse, I think. Somebody can correct me. This is the residential property that we are selling separately. There is a septic easement on this lot for this house. We had to expand the septic to enable it to house up to 12 students was the original plan. And the remainder of the land you see here is owned by Upper Valley Land Trust. But
yeah, so you're pretty tight on open space across the road. Nothing there.
Jeannie would have to tell me. I apologize. I don't think this is Upper Valley Land Trust land, or it is. No, it is not. Right, Jeannie?
It is.
Across. Oh, it is. Okay. There is you have to cross the road to access that property. But again, none of this has been paid or managed for growing or any kind of nutrient management for growing or grazing, but that I'm aware of.
Yeah. So a person's going to be pretty limited to what they can do there with that property, as far as I can see. That up there, up toward the house up on that end, it looks like there's a field there, but they're also in that upper left-hand corner of the farm property. It looks like there's something different more to your left. up in that corner of the farm property,
Here,
right
yeah.
there. I don't know if that's a wet area because it looks like a little brook coming down through.
Well, this is my bad attempt at drawing a property boundary. And this is the mobile home that is on the property that was where the resident farmer lived.
Yeah,
And is technically still available for resident farmer to live.
yeah.
I think, I think this is the house. Chris can correct me if I'm wrong. That might be
That's
it.
the
but
barn,
That's the barn. Okay, so the house is here.
right?
Are there questions for Pat from committee members in regards to what she has told us? I guess,
Senator
I guess,
Collmore.
Brian?
Yeah, thank you, Bobby. Thank you, Pat. So I'm just curious, the original gifting was directly to Vermont Technical College, correct?
Correct.
How does that intersect with other assets that you might have that have some connection with the whole state college system? In other words, if you're able to sell this, the money that you get from it will go directly to VTC's budget to some degree, and how does that, are there other assets that are held by any of the other institutions that are apart from the Vermont State College system itself?
I couldn't answer that in confidence, but I suspect the answer is yes. I mean, as I understand the legislation, any property we own on the campus where the state has invested dollars, or specifically main campus, the legislature has to be involved. Like if we were to close the college or to sell the college, the legislature has to approve it. But for example, our enterprise center, which is off our main campus, Norwich Farm, which is not on the main campus, is not subject to that same provision. But for where the state may have capital dollars or bonding, where they're provided as collateral against Vermont State College's bonds. And we are running into that issue in some other property, but that's not the case here, since this was acquired 7-ish years ago and it's not pledged as collateral. It does not have any state capital dollars. The capital invested were grant dollars, proceeds from the sale, or our own general operating revenue. So it's not state bonding dollars or state capital dollars invested.
Okay, thank you.
So all the money that you've spent putting into retrofitting the house to make it able to house students, the Creamery, any of that money came from the sale of the property to the Upper Valley Land Trust.
Actually, we had a federal TACT grant. Don't ask me to tell you off the top of my head what TACT is the acronym for, but we had a grant, a large one that came to the college to do a lot of agricultural work, part of which was to build the Creamery on the property here. We also had a small working lands grant engaged in that. And then we had the proceeds from the sale of the adjoining land to Upper Valley Land Trust that were involved in the retrofit. We spent approximately, in the last several years, we've spent over $1 million between renovation and operation of these properties. I think rough accounting was about $1.1 million. And, you know, we are honoring our obligation to the lessor, to Norwich Farms Creamery. We are plowing the driveways, we're mowing the lawn, we dispose of the gray water for the creamery that is produced in the process of their production. We fix all repairs, et cetera, et cetera. So we are the landlord, and we've been I hope and believe, a responsible landlord. But yeah, we've got at least $1.1 million invested directly in that property. Not all of it grant funds. I'm believing the grant funds, I apologize, I didn't have a chance to look it up. I think it might have been in the neighborhood of $400,000. But the equipment that we own in the creamery, which is our equipment, which we lease to Mr. Gray, is bound by that grant agreement from that federal TACT grant, and which indicates that we have to use it for educational purposes. So our plan is, when we sell it, to bring that equipment here to the Randolph Center campus. We have which you're aware of, Senator Starr, and happy to present to the committee, we have a major agriculture and food systems program transformation effort underway as we speak, that we're wrapping up in the next month, looking at how our ag programs here at our Randolph Center campus could be revitalized, given changing nature of dairy, changing nature of agriculture. And it's a phase 2 plan to build the value-added dairy processing here on the Randolph Center campus, which we, for reasons I am not fully aware of, we chose not to do before when we got the Siegler gift. So the plan is to continue to pursue that, but pursue it here on the Randolph campus, where we're walking distance for students, where we have our own farm, et cetera, et cetera. And we're surrounded by multiple dairy farms that can provide milk and or on-site educational experience. Unlike
So
right.
whoever buys that then doesn't get any of the Creamery equipment. the
Correct.
way-
Correct.
Yeah.
I mean, there is like, I mean, we can sell it, but we have to pay a portion back to the feds if we
Well-
sell that equipment.
You know, years ago, I went to VTC, and we bottled our own milk, you know, and it was a good learning experience. You know, I spent, you know, that was your class, every so often you'd work in the Creamery, and it, you know, that would be good if you had that right there on campus. I don't know why it ever left, but anyways.
Yeah, I don't know, but that is part of the plan, frankly, and talking with Sodexo about buying milk, about buying cheese, yogurt, whatever we may do. I mean, we've got a built-in market right here. They do a lot of Vermont purchasing, and we've been talking to them right along about that. So there is interest. Yes.
Yeah, Chris?
Yeah, thanks. You know, I'm sure that legally, obviously, you're well within your rights to proceed with the sale. But what would you say to folks who suggest that the spirit of the donation was meant to keep it in perpetuity as a whatever, as a model, as a way to keep the college directly connected with ag, and you know, I'm thinking of, I live close to UVMMC. There's a building up there that was donated to the hospital, and it has in the deed that it is forever dedicated to public health. And so the hospital sometimes comes up with creative ways to define that, and we've wondered if we could use it for medicines. And anyway, the point is that it was donated, and it had a covenants in that legal maneuver. It sounds like the donation we're talking about here didn't have that, but I gotta believe in the spirit was not sort of imagined that it would only be for a short period and then end up being sold for the benefit of the university or the college. So could you just comment on that? What would you say to folks that are telling us that this is really in violation of that spirit?
Well, I can appreciate that attitude, but I also feel pretty strongly, if that was a spirit that the Sieglers felt so deeply, then they should A, have made it a covenant, or B, might have spoken to us sometime in the last 3 years when we've been talking about the troubles we've been having in the farm. And we certainly went into it with the spirit of it being a long-term commitment. I think you know, investment of over $1 million is signal that we were serious. We had hoped that this could work. And yet service to students and our educational mission is number one. And when the students say to us, and folks have argued, one semester, how do you know? Well, we can't afford to have an unhappy experience in our agriculture program. Our enrollment in our agricultural program is through the floor. I mean, we've got 26 students in that program combined in all years right now. And that's part of the reason why we need to redo the program. And our commitment and connection to agriculture is strong. We are not giving that up. We have a farm here in Randolph with 85 cows, and students who milk them, just like Senator Starr did. And I would argue that, yes, that might be the spirit, but we can't afford to have the students of Vermont Tech and the taxpayers of the state of Vermont subsidize a farm operation that is not benefiting them in one way at all. And then when you add the fact that the proceeds we could net from this sale could provide, 25 or 50 scholarships to students, it's not responsible for us to sell this at less than fair market value, especially given the financial condition that we're in. And I've heard it argued, well, you're so far in debt. What does, a few $100,000 mean? It means a lot. I mean, and our debt is directly related to COVID. I mean, we were on track for a very successful year till COVID hit. And what we're living here is a COVID problem that we will be out of within a couple, 3 years, especially with the assistance that the legislature is already proposing to provide us. So I can respect that spirit, but the reality is we can't afford to do it. And, and if somebody wishes to continue to subsidize the operation of the dairy and continue to subsidize that farm, great. Throw us some money and we'll sell it to whomever wishes to buy it. But it's our fiduciary responsibility to the taxpayers of the state of Vermont and our students to maximize within reason, the sale that we're going to have. Now, admittedly, Upper Valley Land Trust had an option to buy it significantly less. That was entirely tied up in the initial deal. And it was related to all that has already happened. And any other buyer was not part of that agreement nor part of that process. So should not enjoy the same benefit in terms of a purchase. That's how I would characterize that.
Any other questions before we move on? If not, Jenny, I guess that you're on my schedule next. So welcome, and you're a member of the Upper Valley Land Trust.
Right. So I'm Jeannie McIntyre. I'm the president of the Upper Valley Land Trust. That means the CEO.
Yeah.
We are a regional land conservancy serving 45 towns in the Connecticut River Valley, from Bath, New Hampshire, and Reigate, south to Springfield and Claremont, Charlestown, and over towards Woodstock and east to Grafton, New Hampshire. We hold lots of conservation easements and own about 25 conservation areas that we manage, one of which is Brookmead Conservation Area, which is next door to the property that VTC is selling. Our organization has been a leader in farmland conservation. We are the first land trust in the country to work directly with USDA on NRCS funded purchase of conservation easements. We've won awards from the New Hampshire Farm Bureau and the New Hampshire Department of Agriculture for our work bringing conservationists and farmers together. I think I'm the only person on this call who was around when the original gift from Mr. Sigler occurred. Oh, excuse me, Chris was in the background. I didn't meet Chris while this was going on. I wasn't aware that Chris was in the background. But I met many, many times with Mr. Sigler over about a year. And also many times with Dan Smith, former BTC president. So I'm very aware of Mr. Sigler's objectives and very respectful of his desire not to become involved in this discussion about what the school should do. I would just observe that Mr. Sigler's the property that is now being sold was owned by a foundation that Mr. Sigler created. It was not that acreage was not in private ownership. Well, it was private foundation. It was a tax exempt private foundation that he created to hold those buildings. And the disposition of those foundation assets was implicated in his choice about how to dispose of them, that those were charitable assets in the sense that they were in this private foundation. So that's something to be aware of when you think about why he might have transferred this property, that portion of his property, to the school. And I think that Mr. Sigler's most significant interests, as I understood them at the time, were in Holstein genetics and Holstein breeding. That's why he built the farm that he built, and in higher education as it pertained to dairy. And when he thought about dairy, he thought of Holstein milk production. That was what he was most excited about. So again, and I'm not speaking for Mr. Sigler, I would just observe that I think the school's proposal to sell the property so that it can invest in dairy education would, in a sustainable way, would be very consistent with what I understood to be the purpose of the gift at the time that it occurred. And I would just flesh out a little bit what Pat referred to as far as the arrangement between the Land Trust and VTC back in 2015. That was a period of time in which both the Land Trust and the VTC were speaking with Mr. Sigler. The school could not easily access capital that it needed to be able to accept a gift and begin a program. And yet they needed access to land to be able to have a program. Essentially, the terms that UVLT and the school agreed upon were like a financing arrangement for the school, where UVLT purchased the property, but did not require the school to give up all of its access to the property. And that at the time was something that both partners felt very positively about. Also would observe, and I imagine this must be in the record somewhere, I certainly talked to Dan Smith about this many times in the spring of 2015. The understanding that the property, Mr. Sigler had redeveloped an agricultural property and placed a lot of structures on top of what was basically, well, the only prime soil that ever was part of that farm. It was not a farm that economically worked. However, there was a belief that the educational aspect, the tuition, the academic experience could sustain the shortfalls in what would otherwise, a dairy operation that would otherwise not be financially viable. I'll just leave it at that. Pat has explained sort of what happened and how that, whether that was a realistic set of assumptions or what transpired after the acquisition. There haven't been cows on that property in a while. After the school discontinued its ag program, that allowed our organization to spend more time on the stewardship of the agricultural, on the open land that we had acquired, and really come to understand its soil and water, flora and fauna, and the implications of that property without consideration to somebody else's business plan, and begin to accept and enjoy the responsibility for our land that we had not been able to do under the terms of our original agreement with the school. So we have made, we're moving on. We don't, once it was clear to us that there wasn't going to be a program of higher education happening on the farm parcel under the auspices of ETC, we've moved on to our organization's mission and plans.
Well, and you folks couldn't come to an agreement on the purchase price of the remaining property, so that now that's going to be split. The original property would be split. You guys have got the land, and the new owner of VTC has the building. So I can't imagine that the property being worth what I think I heard you're trying to list it for something. 1.1 million, I think I either heard that or read that. But anyways, any questions for Jeannie? Brian?
Thank you, Mr. Chair. It's not necessarily just for Jeannie, but for Pat, if she cares. Just to follow up on the chair's sort of question, it seems like from what I'm hearing, it's not going to be able to be a functioning farm. It just doesn't work that way. And I'm wondering who in the world would buy it. I mean, out of all the situations that could come up, I'm trying to scratch my head and try to figure out who it is that's all of a sudden going to arrive one day and say, you know what, I've been looking for exactly this, and here's the 1.1 million. I wonder about that. And I also wonder, and Pat, you mentioned the zoning situation there in Norwich. Is there anything to prevent somebody from just coming in, purchasing it, leveling everything, and putting up a huge housing development?
Well, that would be up to the zoning board in Norwich, and up to the current zoning regs. They do enable for the conditional uses of planned use development for housing, and there's a density calculation that I'll admit I did not spend the time going through to know how many houses you could build on there. I will say we've had interest from a couple of people thus far who have looked, who were interested in maintaining some degree of agriculture operation. I know at least one person did speak with Mr. Gray, and that person's no longer interested. And then we apparently have somebody now looking who might have an interest in an agriculture operation. So it's not unheard of. And then, of course, there's the Norwich Farms Foundation, who had made us an offer, not at the asking price, mind you, but so I don't think it's unheard of. It's not an ideal place to run a dairy farm by any stretch. And my humble non-dairy farmer, but has learned a lot opinion. But that's up to some folks to figure out how to make that work.
Yep,
Okay.
I will just step in to say that I'm aware of the same sort of background level of inquiry that Pat is. I've had several conversations with farmers who are interested potentially in making offers on that property. I have steered them toward the realtor and towards the school, because obviously, the land trust is not selling anything. But I will say that the business plans that I've heard about are not dairy business plans, and but they're farms, and so I think it needs to be understood that there's a lot, farms come in all different shapes and sizes and kinds, and the school is not the asset that the school is trying to dispose of has value to multiple parties.
That's great to hear. Thank you.
Anthony?
Thank you. In some ways, you just answered what I was thinking, because if it's not suitable, but we keep hearing it's not suitable for a dairy farm, but there's other kinds of farms that potentially could be turned into, and maybe whether it's the college or whether it's a private individual, the college using it as an example of how to diversify. If dairy doesn't work, what do we do with these acres, and how can we make it profitable, producing some other product? Or whether it's a private buyer who says, I'm interested in buying it, but I understand it doesn't work for dairy. Perhaps it works for something else. So I just I hope that we're open to that possibility of it being something other than dairy, because clearly dairy is not going to work on that small of a footprint.
I think the other point that that wasn't I alluded to but wasn't explicit about, and I'm not going to try to do a screen share, but that in addition to the fact that the property the school has for sale is quite small, the map of the or the photo of the property that you saw, is a photo that does not show the NWI identified wetlands that are significant at the state and national level. It does not show the flood zone along Blood Brook or buffers along the drainages, of which there are many on this property. And, I think that there is historically been dairying on that property long prior to Mr. Sigler, but there also is climate change, and there's also greater awareness about water quality and soil impacts. Most of the prime soil on that property is under buildings or in the flood zone. Much of the state level soil is footnoted B wet soil. Those are things to be aware of when you think about how much space there is for different types of agricultural use, respecting that this land is owned by a land conservation organization with a broad mission of ecological protection as well as farmland support. So, I think that the school is wise for both the reasons of campus access, but also soil quality, to be doing its dairying in Randolph, where I think there's probably more opportunity.
And I would just add, I agree with you, Senator. There's lots of opportunity for any kind of agriculture on any farm. We own over 500 acres of land here in Randolph, where we can do anything like that. And it makes no sense for us to own 2 farms. And it makes no sense for us to own parcels in Norwich when we have land right here that we can conduct. And that's exactly part of our ag and food systems transformation plan, is more of that diversified ag that you speak of. We have a sugar bush, we have an apple orchard, we can do growing, we can do grazing, we can do beef, we can do goats. All of that is exactly the kind of thing we're looking at here. And we simply do not need a second farm. And we cannot afford to continue to maintain it.
Point well taken.
Yeah.
We only got a few minutes. We should have, I guess, given ourselves more time. We have to be on the Senate floor at around 11. I'd like to give Chris an opportunity to speak to us. So good morning, Chris, and welcome. You're the Creamery operator, I understand it.
Thank you, Senator. Yes, that's correct. I'll read a quick, can you hear me okay?
Yeah, very good.
I'm going to read a quick statement. I also hope that you were able to get Omer Trayman from the Norwich Farm Foundation on this. He's up next, and he's the buyer you're looking for, Pat.
Oh. Well, if you cut yours short, maybe Omer will solve your problem.
Can I defer to Mr. Tryman, please?
Sure.
Thank you.
And we did visit a little bit before we got started. So Omer, tell us a little bit about what you've got in mind.
Sure. So my name is Omer Tryman. I'm the treasurer of the Norwich Farm Foundation. I'm representing a group of Norwich residents who submitted an offer to purchase the Norwich Farm property. And we came together as a group really with the goal of maintaining local food security in Norwich and in the Upper Valley, creating affordable farmer housing, preserving the working landscape, and aiming to restore some of the regenerative agriculture that existed in the area. A quick background on the group: we came together a few years ago when, as President Moulton mentioned, VTC ended their program. The Upper Valley Land Trust was exploring their option and put out an open call for business plans. So a few of us got together and spent a bunch of time coming up with a plan that at the time we projected could actually produce a sustainable small micro dairy on the property, specifically built around value-added dairy. And this was inspired by many of the original goals. As we know, the Upper Valley Land Trust did not make the purchase at the time, and we stayed in touch with VTC and spoke with President Moulton about how we might establish this nonprofit to take over the farm and see through the vision. Last spring, that's spring 2020, we submitted an unsolicited offer. We sent the college an email. We offered to buy the farm property for $300,000. And for context, we had not yet established the foundation. We had no commitments from donors. The farm wasn't listed for sale. It was an attempt to open a dialogue with the college about how to preserve the farm. Fast forward to the fall of 2020, the college did reach out to us and let us know that the farm was going to be listed on the open market. We used that opportunity to establish the foundation formally. And over the past few weeks, we've been reaching out to the local community to see if there was enough demand, enough interest to raise money to purchase the property. And over the past few weeks, we've had over 150 pledges, ranging in sizes from $10 to $10,000. We have about $180,000 in committed pledges to help us purchase the property. We also spoke with local institutions and private investors regarding financing the property. So with that support and getting a third-party independent assessment and factoring in local precedents for sales to nonprofits and discounts associated with that, we made an offer of $610,000 for the farm and the adjacent property, which, as President Moulton mentioned, was not accepted by the college. So since sharing our plans with the local community, the awareness really has grown. And I'd say, just in closing, as Vermont citizens and taxpayers, I think we all share in the economic challenges and the burdens of the state college. We're equally concerned that Vermont is rapidly losing value-added dairy farms such as Norwich Farm. And that trend is potentially orders of magnitude larger in terms of negative economic consequences than others. We also believe that given the shared resources and the goals as Vermonters, that we should be able to address both and really save our local value-added dairy farms for future generations.
Thank you, Omer. So you guys upped your offer from 3 to 600,000, but you're still a little short.
We are. And I think part of our challenge is both finding enough fundraising in very short order to try and come up with an offer that approaches what the college might accept. Also, as a new foundation, every dollar we spend on the property is a dollar not invested in the farm property after the purchase. So that's an ongoing conversation that we're trying to sort through.
Yep. Have you looked for other contributors to your cause? Outside of Vermont, are there any trusts that would be interested in assisting you, or any federal grants that would be available? Have you checked all those things, Omer?
We have, and there's a bit of a catch-22 in our process, which is that we don't feel comfortable soliciting and raising direct cash until we know that there's an offer accepted to which the money will go. So we don't want to ask, especially folks outside of Vermont, to give to a nonprofit that was established for a purchase if we don't know that the purchase will happen. So our part of our goal in the original offer and the opt offer is to try and figure out a way to engage in a dialogue where we can more aggressively solicit donations and raise enough money to see that transfer happen.
Yeah. There are questions for Omer from any committee members? No. Because I think, VTC would like to see it stay in ag if at all possible, but I would expect they have an obligation to get as much for it as possible, of course, and I know Pat, you'd have trouble selling it to me for 1.1 with 6.5 acres. I'm glad I'm up in Troy, I guess. Chris.
Thank you, Senator. If I could just take a couple minutes to respond.
Yeah, we've still got a couple. So.
Okay, I have a statement I can read. I would just like to say ahead of this, if we run out of time, our business is cash flowing. Omer and the committee, we have an incredible group of way smarter people than me, MBAs, doctors. This guy Omer is a total genius. And we have a 10-year revenue neutral business plan that shows that this particular location, this particular facility under our management runs in a revenue neutral manner. There's a lot of talk of dairy. This is pure value-added dairy here, and it will work as an ag professional. I don't see any other use for this property. I don't see anyone realistically coming in here that doesn't just have boatloads of money and have a private place. And I personally believe it will end up as real estate, given what we have researched regarding zoning and everything. So, senators, I'd like to thank you for hosting us today. We thank you for your ongoing service to our beloved state, in particular attention to dairy and agriculture. My name is Chris Gray, and together with my wife, Laura Brown, we are owners and operators of Norwich Farm Creamery. We make milk, yogurt, cheese, ice cream. We process approximately 300 gallons every week. All of our products are sold within a 20-mile radius. We're turning away customers. Some of our customers are the co-op food stores, King Arthur Flour, Woodstock Farmers Market, and of course, Dan & Witt's. We haul our milk in from Billings Farm because the cows have been taken away from this property. Last year, we increased our business 100%. We're cash flow positive. We have a turnover last year of $250,000. I've been working in value-added dairy in Vermont for 15 years. I'm proficient with everything from raw milk to grade A. We are a grade A inspected facility. In addition to my real world training, I've studied at VIAC, Sterling College, dairy processing, Cornell, and the University of Wisconsin. Most of my learning, thankfully, has come directly from the Vermont Agency of Agriculture. I would like in particular to thank the dairy section for their incredible work. Now, as you said, Mr. Siegler donated the whole farm together. And if you took a moment to take away all of the boundaries and borders from that photo that was on before, what you'd be looking down on is one whole farm. And that as a whole complete entity was given with the pursuit of value-added dairy in mind. At that time, the community were promised a working value-added dairy farm and education center. This was a generous gift and powerful and included all the infrastructure you'd ever need to run a farm this size. We've been working for the last 5 years to protect this farm. Vermont Tech recruited us here to be their long-term partner, to create and operate a creamery, to teach their students, to supply food to the community. We ourselves have put in more than $500,000 in investment into the property and personal investment into surviving this crisis under which we've been for the last 4 years. We've had to incur more than $50,000 in legal bills to maintain our rights here on the property. One thing I want to note about the grant, the Department of Labor grant, there were many goals to that grant, student education being one of them, but one of the stated goals of the grant was entrepreneurial incubation. And we were chosen as those entrepreneurs to incubate our business here. So while VTC might have not executed the other part of the grants properly, we've stayed on this farm, we've created a business, and within 5 years, with both our arms tied behind our back, we have actually incubated our business into a real viable business. So that part of the large grant that VTC received, I feel that we fulfilled. And actually, it should be really one of the success stories of the grant. There is a new value-added dairy business in Vermont. It's called Norwich Farm Creamery. We are trying to establish a new value-added nonprofit foundation that will support value-added dairy in the future, support this farm, and hopefully create opportunities for VTC students to intern and work here. We have in fact maintained we have asked for an ongoing relationship with VTC students to actually learn here. So we hope that we can have dialogue with them to find a better solution. So we do have a plan to keep this a working farm. You know, people on this call are talking about it as a farm. However, they also talk about it as a real estate, and they talk about 6 acres divided from all the working land. There's 200 years of precedent for cows to be on that working land. There's a 65-acre agricultural envelope within the Upper Valley Land Trust. You know, there are pastures, there are fields. The college has a lease for their cows on that property. To me, as an agricultural professional, I see no reasonable reason why you cannot have a herd on that land and manage it responsibly and properly. Our goal was to bring in a top professional herd manager, a young Vermont family to work this land, to do it right. We are going for regenerative, intensive grazing with 20 cows. With 20 cows on this land, which it will support, we can make this entire farm cash flow under a pure value-added dairy model. There will be other diversified agriculture along with it. So that's all I'd like to say. I know your time is running short. I do have a lot more to say, and I'm welcoming your questions. Thank you.
Well, thank you, Chris. And as you can see, I'm losing my members because we have to be on the floor, and if you aren't there, it
I understand.
certainly shows up quick. So we're going to have to drop off, but really, I want to thank all of you folks, you know, for your time this morning. And if you have other comments, you know, feel free to send those to us. And, you know, if you figure out some way we can help you in any way, shape, or form, please contact us, and we'll do our best to try to get in and help you out. I mean, we would like to see that stay in some form of certainly agriculture. Doesn't have to be dairy, but that part, you know, we understand the lack of land and stuff, but if we can help you, holler. We'd certainly be glad to pitch in. So if there's no other comments from committee members, we'll thank you for your time and wish you well. Chris, did you
Thank
have something? No?
No, thank you.
Okay.
Thank you so much for your time.
Right.
Very much
Yeah.
appreciated.